Hi everyone, welcome to the North of Tyne Cabinet this month. We have a very interesting situation, obviously, with lockdown, coming out of lockdown, all of the economic impact of COVID, all of the health impact of COVID. And of course, within a few weeks, we will have left the European Union with everything that that entails for our trading relationships and our businesses. And there's a number of really quite innovative proposals coming forward to Cabinet for how we do the best for the people that we're all here to serve. So we'll move straight on to the meeting. We have apologies from Councillor Forbes, from Mayor Norma Redfern, and late apologies in from Councillor Richard Dodd. And in their place, we have Carl Johnson from North Tyneside, Jed Bell from Newcastle. So welcome along. And we also have here Lucy Winskull, Chair of the LEP, Robin Fry, our VCSE sector, and Bishop Christine Hardman, who will be talking about her work later in the meeting. Do we have any declarations of interest? I've not had any advance notification of any. So I can see heads shaking, so that's a no. We have the minutes of the previous meeting have been published. Can we take them as a true record? Agreed. I can see heads nodding there, so that's agreed.
Agreed, yeah.
So the first item of substance is the impact of coronavirus. There's a presentation to come from Rob Hamilton, who is our chief economist. Rob, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Jamie. It's not every meeting that starts with someone interested in getting to hear about lots of economic information and looking forward to discussion around Brexit. But obviously, both of those issues are particularly pertinent at the moment. So initially, sort of kicking off in terms of the economic impact of COVID and what we've seen and what we're experiencing so far. Just in terms of today's presentation, just to sort of set expectations, what I'm going to look to do, sort of just turning to the next slide, is to give a quick recap on the current national position. And I know sort of Cabinet members were particularly interested in what the fortunes of different sectors have been to date. And then the second and third issues are focusing in really on the North of Tyne area and having a look at both any evidence for whether the Northeast and the North of Tyne area is experiencing a faster rise in unemployment than other parts of the country, and then also having a look at the distribution across the combined authority area and seeing if we can spot any trends there. And then finally, I'll finish off with a forecast from the Bank of England, which sets out some of the things we should expect. Just in terms of setting expectations, I'm not planning to, I'm afraid, get into a detailed discussion around the tier system, which was announced by the Prime Minister last night, and clearly, as a region, we'll find out what lies ahead for us as well. But instead, focusing in on the data that we've seen so far and what we know so far. So. With that as sort of words of introduction, I'll just sort of turn to the first substantive slide. So the slide on the left-hand side looks at the main elements of UK GDP, effectively how the UK economy is performing. And we've set the data so that just before the pandemic sort of hit the UK, we've set the economy at 100% at 100. And those different lines, sorry, I see a few people sort of trying to read the lines. And the green line shows how construction activity sort of behaved over the period of time, the initial lockdown. And can
I interrupt you there? Has everybody else got the graphs on the screen, because I can't see them? So they are broadcasting. Okay, that carry on.
Yeah, Jamie got them. Yeah.
Great. Sorry, Rob, continue.
Okay, no, that's absolutely fine. And please, I'm very happy to answer any questions as we go along as well. So the green line shows that construction activity really did drop off very, very sharply under the first national lockdown. and then picked up sort of relatively quickly, I guess, in the second half of this year as construction sites found COVID-secure ways of continuing their projects. In contrast, perhaps, the pink line, which shows production, effectively that's manufacturing plus a few other little elements. The decline in manufacturing was a little bit less pronounced, and actually manufacturing activity isn't too far off the level that it was before the COVID pandemic hit us. But overall, if you look at the economy as a whole, we're still around 9% off the level of activity that was prevailing back in January last year. So that, by historic standards, is really quite significant, and has had, as we know, sort of big consequences in terms of people's lives and livelihoods. And we know in terms of those impacts that the economic and the health outcomes are really very strongly interlinked. The chart on the right-hand side, I don't think I need to dwell upon, just shows the sort of cases, daily cases, data sort of correct as of yesterday. But the encouraging sign is there are signs that certainly the rise has reduced, and actually, if anything, there's maybe some indications that daily cases have peaked or are plateauing. Just turning to the next set of issues. So colleagues might recall news headlines a few weeks ago highlighting the fact that the Northeast had experienced the largest rise in unemployment of any of the regions or countries across the UK. I mean, actually, so since then it's now been equaled by London. And clearly that's a matter of some concern, especially given that the Northeast, we've tended to fare relatively badly in recessions in the past. Sometimes those recessions have hit us more badly, or the recovery period has been slower. So actually what I wanted to do is to sort of look behind that data. It's survey data, comes with a degree of volatility, and have a look and see, are there any other indications that we should be particularly aware of in terms of the impacts here in the Northeast. So I've looked at a range of other data, and the good news is that relative to the rest of the country, that other data looks better. Clearly, when we're facing a 10% reduction in the in the size of the economy, none of the data really today is going to be sort of good news at all. But sort of turning to the first of those additional charts on the left-hand side, this shows the number of people claiming benefits, unemployment or other benefits, and compares it to well, in this case, the GB average. And you can see actually there's no real evidence. In fact, there's no evidence at all that the Northeast, the North of Tyne Combined Authority area, is having a disproportionately bad impact. It's a bad impact across the whole of the country. The chart on the right-hand side looks at the furlough data, the job retention scheme. Now, clearly, with the imposition of the national lockdown in November, we probably would expect those numbers to increase. The data I've shown you today is the latest available data. But I wanted to highlight that, again, there's no impact that those data are worse here in the Northeast, the North of Tyne, than other parts of the country. I would also like to highlight that there is some evidence that females have been hit slightly harder than the males, also that young people have been hit slightly harder than of older people. And in part, that's likely to be due to differences in the types of jobs that those different categories of people are taking. But that's certainly something, obviously, we need to look at and keep an eye on, especially as we move forward. And in terms of moving forward, there's also some data that's perhaps a little bit more forward-looking, but it comes with a degree of a health warning, which is around redundancies that have been announced. So this isn't necessarily things that have happened, but big companies in particular, highlighting where redundancies might be made in the future. And I've shown the data here for a few other combined authority geographies as well. And although of clearly different places are different sizes, and so you might expect sort of different impacts, and I'll come on to that in the next slide. But I wanted to highlight that there's no real evidence that as we sort of move through the summer into the early autumn, that either the Northeast was experiencing a relative increase, a pickup compared to some of those other areas, or indeed actually that the rate of those redundancy notifications was accelerating. So that was, again, sort of tentatively sort of good news, although recognising, clearly the national lockdown is going to have had an impact on sectors in recent weeks. In terms of the next chart, what I've looked at is the rate of redundancy. So apologies that this is one of many charts that's so small that unfortunately no one will be able to read it. But what I've done is I've highlighted here in red the redundancy notification rate. So that's the number of redundancies divided by the working age population. And in red, it shows the figures here in the Northeast. Other lines are for other parts of the country. And again, what I wanted to highlight is there's no evidence that the impact is in terms of that redundancy data is worse here in the Northeast. Now, the data does come with health risks and warnings. Just because of notifications have been announced doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be sort of carried through the various technical issues. But again, it's reason to believe that in the Northeast so far at least there's no evidence of a disproportionately sort of negative impact, or there's mixed evidence of a disproportionately negative impact. In terms of the next slide, here I'm looking at the rate of unemployment in some of the different communities within the North of Tyne geography. So sort of honing down below the North of Tyne and looking at individual ward level data across the 3 local authority areas. And each of these spots reflects the data relating to an individual ward across the 3 areas. On the right hand, on the x-axis, moving from left to right, is the rate of unemployment within that ward before the pandemic hit. So more deprived communities are to the right of that chart. On the y-axis, moving upwards, is the extent to which the unemployment rate or the benefit claimant rate has increased since the pandemic hit. So what I wanted to draw your attention to is that there's some evidence that the most deprived communities have seen bigger increases on average in the rate of benefit claimants, and also that there's some individual wards, some communities that for whatever reason, perhaps due to a single employer or idiosyncratic factors, some places have had particularly pronounced impacts, and that's something again that we'll need to look at going forward, particularly as we move into the new year, about whether there's additional considerations that need to be made or thought about within particular communities. And you're pleased with this sort of degree of negative sort of information from myself. So this is the final chart I was going to share with you today. This is a chart from a forecast from the Bank of England. So to the left of the dotted line is actual data, and to the right is what they expect is likely to happen going forward, and their forecasts are similar, but just a little bit more up to date than some of the other forecasts which have been produced. In blue is the level of economic activity, GDP, that I showed you broken down a few minutes ago, and in pink is what they expect to happen in terms of the unemployment rate. So I guess the sort of bad news that I wanted to leave you with really, unfortunately, is that unemployment tends to be a lagging indicator. So unfortunately, it is likely that we are going to see unemployment sort of rising as we go forward. Clearly, no one knows what's going to happen going forward, and our hope is that the furlough scheme, the job retention scheme, will mitigate those impacts. But I guess I wanted to say, we've got to continue to monitor the situation and be particularly conscious and aware of the fact that we might see further rises in unemployment over the next 3 to 6 months. So that's really all I wanted to share with you, just very briefly and in summary. That clearly we're quite a long way off the level of economic activity that was presiding before the pandemic hit. That there is mixed evidence on whether the unemployment is rising more rapidly in the Northeast. The official data perhaps shows that, but actually looking underneath that data, there's perhaps more positive indications in some of the other indicators. So thirdly, there is some evidence of impact that's slightly greater in the more deprived communities, and we need to watch that. And fourthly, that unfortunately it is likely that there's going to be further difficult times ahead, and further increases in unemployment. Although obviously, we hope that they can be mitigated as much as possible. Thank you.
Rob, thank you very much for that. It was a very detailed report. I think we all knew, anecdotally, the scale of this problem. We also all knew there were problems before COVID hit. We have an inclusive economy board for that very reason. And that's why we launched our Green New Deal program. It's interesting to see that the scale of unemployment, and somewhat encouraging that we've safeguarded over 1,700 jobs already, which has made a real difference to people. I know later on Bruce will be introducing an item at some of the latest interventions we're going to make to create even more jobs. With that, does anybody have any questions or comments on Rob's report? No, Rob, thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. And I know it feeds into all the work we're doing behind the scenes, but it's very good to be sharing that with the public. Thanks very much, Rob. So that will take us on to our next item, which is an update on Brexit. This is an area that Councillor Forbes normally covers, but he's had to put his apologies in today. So Councillor McCarthy is going to introduce this. Thanks very much, Jace.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just make a few comments, if that's okay, Chair, and then I'll pass over to Rob to run through the report in more detail and respond to questions. Chair, we're all aware that we left the European Union, the UK left the European Union on the 31st of January this year, and the impacts on business and citizens are going to be felt in the new year, really, after the 1st of January next year. As we all know, because we'll be following this avidly on the news, we don't really know what the rules will be around trade with the UK and the European Union. And this report reminds us about the likely impact on the economy of Brexit on the North East. And we know in the North East that we are more dependent on trade with Europe than any other region in the country. And that's really important to note, I think, in terms of what we can do in the Combined Authority area. So our ability to mitigate the negative impacts of that, of Brexit more broadly is very limited. But I think some of what we can do in terms of direct help to business, the sources of support that they might need, that collaborative working that we're currently all involved in, we can help and support them, businesses in our region, to be better prepared for the 1st of January. And I think we need to continue to share our knowledge, our understanding of the impact on business, things that they are sharing with us in terms of elected representatives, and indeed with Lucy and Millette and colleagues who are involved there. If we continue to work closely together, then we can best make sure that the impact of the North of Tyne support can be shared across the region. And of course, this all comes on top of, we've just had a very sobering presentation from Rob about the impact of the pandemic. And then Brexit to come on top of that means we've kind of got a double whammy that we need to be prepared for. So I think our best endeavours are about working together to make sure that we understand the impact of all of this on businesses, so that we can use the resources that we've got access to do the best that we can across our 3 local authority areas. And with that, Chair, I'll hand back to Rob to pick out details of the actual report. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor McCarthy. And so given the quality of that introduction, I'll just be very brief indeed, and sort of pick out some of the perhaps the sort of nerdier information, the statistics and the like. So as Councillor McCarthy mentioned, we, in terms of businesses and residents, have yet to feel the impact of Brexit in terms of changes in the rules and regulations that they face. Although clearly we know that some businesses and some people have already responded in anticipation of what they expect to happen going forward. Just picking out a few sort of items from the paper, and then perhaps returning to the recommendations at the end. just to highlight, as Councillor McCarthy mentioned, previous analysis, it seems quite a long time ago that the Treasury is producing Brexit forecast, but they did predict that the impact in the northeast would be around twice as great as the impact on the least affected so part of the country. So again, it's this is perhaps relative to the pandemic, economic impacts over very different timescales, but has the potential to be significant going forward. Of course, there are also potential upsides and opportunities, and discussions with businesses have particularly highlighted opportunities around supply chain consolidation, and the possibility that, if you like, government intervention, state aid, or economic and industrial strategy could be perhaps a little bit more targeted and pinpointed than has been the case previously. It's worth highlighting that some of the discussions with businesses have pointed out that there could be quite pronounced impacts of Brexit, even if there is a free trade deal agreed. So there's clearly uncertainty at this stage about what's going to happen, what's going to be agreed in the next 4.5, 5 weeks. But there is the potential for significant disruption, if a relatively thin deal is agreed and approved. In terms of some of the other activities that Councillor McCarthy mentioned have been undertaken over the past year, clearly there has been a lot of work, a lot of consultation with national government, with businesses, with stakeholders, trying to get under the skin of potential concerns or issues. The development of sort of toolkits, information, trying to encourage and to support businesses to get as ready as possible. The Combined Authority has also increased the scale of its inward investment fund. So the North East has been a major recipient of inward investors in the past, very successful. And it's important that we retain that position and maintain that leading position in the UK going forward. And it's encouraging, actually, that there's a number of very strong proposals in the pipeline, together with quite rapid recruitment at the first company that's benefited from sort of intervention and support from the Combined Authority. Looking forward, the Combined Authority, as you'll recall, approved in a recent cabinet meeting proposals for a recovery and renewal deal, setting out a range of interventions to, particularly with sort of thinking about mitigating the impacts of COVID, but also a number of those are also relevant to mitigating potential impacts around Brexit as well. Government, in fact, since this report was published, government have announced details of a free ports competition. It's actually been restricted in the first instance to England. They've announced that at least 7 areas in England will benefit from free port status. There's the detailed work being undertaken by Lucy's colleagues at the LEP and across the whole region, and the Combined Authorities to develop up a strong proposal to make the most of that opportunity. As we sort of move into the next few weeks and the new arrangements become clearer, as Councillor McCarthy mentioned, it is important that we sort of signpost and direct businesses to the most appropriate forms of advice and support that are out there. And so that's something we propose to do through our website and through the regular sort of liaison that we have with businesses as well. So I think that was all I was planning to cover in terms of the report itself. The recommendations are back on the first page. I won't plan to read through all those, but I'm very happy to answer any questions on the report itself.
Thanks very much, Rob. It's interesting, obviously, that our first 2 items are about massive economic disruptors, if we want to use the technical language. Things that are going to cause people to lose their jobs if we lose the everyday language, potentially, which is what really matters to people. But they have very different manifestations. The Brexit, it's about trade deals. With COVID, it's actually about large elements of trade simply can't happen while trying to keep people safe. So regardless of that, it's interesting, touching on the point that Joyce made, that Lucy made in the LEP AGM this morning, is that the way out of this does involve, it's a necessary condition, not sufficient, but a necessary condition that we continue to work together. And it's great that we have Bishop Christine here on the Inclusive Economy Board, that we have all of our local authorities really strongly bought into this, that our business communities, the whole of the public service, the universities are in this. It gives us a fighting chance. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy, and it doesn't mean that we're going to solve every problem overnight. This is really quite serious. On the subject of free ports, obviously this has been a very hot topic. When you try and ram two words together and encompass an entire approach to trade, it doesn't quite do it justice. There have been many models of free ports around the world that have simply displaced economic activity from one place to another, or have been opportunities for tax avoidance. So I'm very pleased at the approach that we've taken in the Northeast. The virtual free port, I think, is actually something that gets around those problems, because we work very closely with the Port of Tyne and our colleagues across the region to support this proposal. So I do think it is actually something, and it's one of those things. If free ports are the way, then we need to make sure that the Northeast does not lose out in this. So that's my thoughts on the subject. Anybody else, any comments or questions for Rob's report? Rob, oh, sorry, Glenn.
I actually had my hand up, my electronic hand up. So maybe it's not working, I don't know. Anyway, I just wanted to just say that I think one of the things about Brexit that we are really quite concerned about is the preparedness of smaller businesses. I know larger ones are pretty much there, but I'm quite concerned that smaller ones have been kind of waylaid by COVID and other issues. And I hope very much that they can pick up and if necessary, government give extra oomph into getting that message across. The second thing is, I think you've touched on free ports, Jamie. It's absolutely crucial that we see a development in the Northeast that will benefit Blythe and other ports. It's absolutely crucial that that happens. So I hope very much that we will continue to do all we can, working together, to ensure that government really do understand that we have not got to miss out up here. And I hope we can kind of have that, possibly even as a regular agenda item, so that we can very much keep focused and working together on it as possible, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, certainly on the issue of free ports, where various discussions I've had with trade ministers, Department of Transport ministers and others, there is a key issue that we have one that works for us. The idea that you simply put a fence around things and can continue the economy on that basis would not work well for us. We need places like the airport involved, like the Port of Tyne and Blythe. And although we're the north of Tyne here, you know, our regional economy is interdependent. Places like Nissan, places like our large pharmaceutical plants around the region, all need to be part of this in order that they can import, process, and export and not become uncompetitive, because so many jobs are dependent upon that. Thank you. Anybody else? Rob, you've yet again done a detailed report, which everybody has, you've answered all the questions in advance. Tremendous anticipation there. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
So this takes us on to the next item. Our Inclusive Economy Board was actually part of the constitution of the North of Tyne. When we set it up, there would be an Inclusive Economy Board, because devolution wasn't just about getting things devolved in order to continue to do them the same. It was about making sure that our economy works for everybody. That's what inclusive economy is. And I'm absolutely delighted that Bishop Christine took on the role of chairing that board. So this is an opportunity for Christine to introduce herself formally to Cabinet. I know you've already met everybody, but in the public domain, over to you, Christine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Rob, you started off by saying that you didn't think anybody would want to hear an economic report or something like that. I was deeply enthusiastic. My first degree was in economics, rather a long time ago now, but it convinced me that our economic behaviour and how we manage our economy and the decisions we make about how we spend our money and how we allocate scarce resources is at the heart of being human. And so it's a very value-driven, for me, a very value-driven affair. So delighted to have the privilege of chairing the Inclusive Economy Board, because not only does the board's existence recognised the significance of our economic lives, our economic decisions. It recognises the value need that economic growth should particularly be for those who are in poverty, those who are often excluded from flourishing in economic life. Economic growth that doesn't take on board the priority of reaching those who are often excluded is, in my view, not an economic growth that leads to the flourishing of our communities and our society. So it's a joy to be on the board. The board I'm really enjoying. We haven't actually met in person, which is one of my greatest sadnesses, because our first meeting was just as lockdown was beginning. But we've done remarkably well, given that we haven't been able to have that human interaction. And the board includes a huge variety of people on it from all kinds of different aspects of life. So civic society, authorities, Department of Work and Pensions, Regional Schools Commissioner, CBI, Board of Commerce, and people who actually run businesses, the unions, people with great expertise, like someone from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, and the universities, fantastic conglomeration of people. The thing that I think we all share in common is that none of us would be wasting our time with this if it was just going to be a talking shop. And so we've got a real culture of saying that we want to have an action-focused life together. And Joyce, who is the vice chair of the board, has been phenomenal in supporting that. I also have to say the officers who are serving the board for inclusive economy are just phenomenal. The North of Tyne officers, they're outstanding and a joy to work with. And of course, they do the real work, and I just get the fun of being able to bring together people and share the meeting. But it's wonderful to be able to do that in such a purposeful way with the resourcing that we have. We started off looking at around 5 work streams, but almost immediately realized that with the pandemic and COVID, we had to focus down on our priorities so we could really be effective and not spread ourselves too thinly. And the 2 work streams that we are particularly focusing on are, first of all, the Good Work Pledge, because good work is just providing jobs that are not really jobs. Doesn't lead to an inclusive economy in terms of inclusive growth. So good work and encouraging companies and others to commit to good work is one of our most important streams, and I'm delighted about it. The other stream is around youth employability, because we know that, as we heard from Rob, that it is often women, and also in particular young people, who suffer the most in terms of the jobs that are hit. So the hospitality industry being really clobbered, a lot of young people have jobs in the hospitality industry in those kind of areas. So we're looking at youth employability and seeing how we can add value to the government's programs, such as the Kickstart scheme, apprenticeship schemes. So we can take those national schemes into hubs that enable us to, with local knowledge, make it easier for our young people to get access to the help that they need, and also to encourage companies to join in that scheme. And there's some really encouraging work going on in that area. We're just beginning to have discussions with Cobalt, the business park, about what might happen there. And what for me is so heartening is that there is such a sense all around the table, everybody from different perspectives, but everybody determined to work on this together. There's huge goodwill and engagement, and many people giving extra time to work on these work streams outside the board meetings. I think that's probably all I want to say for the moment, except, yes, also, we're going to go on next, the Poverty Truth Commission, but I think linked to that is we've become very aware that in the Northeast particularly, and that child poverty is a hugely serious issue, and that child poverty is a factor of many things, but not least the economic lives of families. So in working for good work, for example, that can make a huge difference to the child poverty that we have. And again, we're looking to see how realistically we can make interventions with the resources of the combined authority that will make a difference. I think that's probably what I want to say, and be very happy to answer any questions if there are any, or indeed Joyce may well think of things that I've missed out.
Sorry, yes, Joyce, please do continue.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think you've missed anything out. Thank you very much, Bishop Christine. I think that was a really thorough overview. I was really delighted when we approached Bishop Christine that she agreed to do this, but she agreed to take on this role only if we were going to act rather than have a talking shop. So I'm really pleased you've mentioned that, because I've kind of got that on my shoulder at every meeting about it's not just about talking about what we think ought to happen. It's actually about delivering on the ground, and I'm really pleased that we can collectively do all we can to use our resources here to deliver on that. I think that's really, really important. Because of Bishop Christine's role in the House of Lords, she has the ability to take to government and took our plans, our post-pandemic plans to government and shared them, promoted them on our behalf. So not only do we have an advocate in our region, but we've also got an advocate who is shouting up for our combined authority area with government, and I think that work is really, really important. And actually, Lucy, the call that we had last week, we were on a Northern Powerhouse Partnership roundtable, and the business community, the business representatives, I don't mean individual businesses, are now much more likely to talk about the importance of investing in schools and education now. I think that's a bit of a change from what we've heard in the past. And actually, I think even they want to work collectively with us and do their level best to support us as a region, recognizing that the people who are most likely not to be in work are young people, and actually there's quite a lot of evidence about over 50s in the community as well. So we've got quite a challenge, I think, in relation to that. But I think, Chair, on behalf of the board, I would just, on behalf of our cabinet, I'd want to say a huge thank you to Bishop Christine for leading us through that new journey. And we'll come to talk about the Poverty Truth Commission report shortly. It's next on our agenda. But I think the support and commitment that we've had from Christine in this work is extremely helpful and really valuable to us, and really value her approach and I don't know, inclusive way of working, I think, which I think has helped us all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Joyce. Christine, can I echo that? I think it's been great working with you.
Amusing bit, but I think it's amusing. I happened to be in the Lords when we were making the final kind of authorisation for the North of Tyne Combined Authority to be formed. And obviously there was real disappointment that it was going to be 3 authorities and not the larger number, including South of the Tyne. And I do hope that one day we become that larger grouping to be effective. But there were many peers questioning whether there was any coherence at all in bringing together Newcastle, North Tyneside and Northumberland. And I was delighted to be able to say that is, since 1882, has precisely been the area of the Church of England Diocese of Newcastle, and that it has a proud history. And so although we'd love it to be bigger, it was far, far better to have that grouping than not to go ahead at all.
Well, we'll not use that as the barrier, and nor will we accept that Hadrian's Wall is going to keep out the south. We look forward to having your counterpart, the Bishop of Durham, joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. I've been so delighted to be with you. I'll be leaving after the poverty item, so thank you.
It is really important work. I mean, you've outlined the moral imperative to be tackling poverty. There's a very sound economic reason as well. Having people not fulfilling their potential is not going to help anybody. You know, we all suffer as a result of that. We all know that the more equal a society, the more prosperous it is. And you're absolutely right on the action focus. Very supportive. Does anybody else have any comments or question for Christine on the work? Glenn?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that this work is something that we're picking up in Northumberland, actually. And we've just set up a working group, cross-party working group to look at food poverty, being led by my Equality and Diversity member on the Cabinet. And that will report to our council next year, early next year. So we are taking it seriously, and hopefully that will benefit all of us. And we'll certainly report back to you on what we've come up with there.
Thanks, Glenn. And Robin?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Christine. Definitely echo what Joyce was saying about how great it is to have you leading this work. And certainly on behalf of the voluntary and community sector, really great to see representation on the board. Certainly a lot of the members that we work with, like yourselves, were already well aware of the issues of poverty pre-pandemic, and are seeing how a lot of that's been escalated in terms of the pressure on mental health services, the pressure on debt advice services, the increased pressure on carers. So yeah, I think we can see a lot of these issues are kind of being escalated. And also, I guess, reflecting on the investment that the North of Tyne Combined Authority made relatively early doors with the capacity fund, and it's great to see some of the impact of that kind of coming to the fore as well. So yeah, really supportive of this work.
Thank you, Robin. Yes, absolutely agree. And I can see nobody else indicating. So at this point, we'll move on to the next item, which is about the Poverty Truth Commission. So Councillor McCarthy will be introducing this. Joyce?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm really pleased to bring this forward to our Combined Authority Cabinet today. We've discussed this in a few different forums, and we certainly considered this at our last meeting of the Inclusive Economy Board. But we also have to recognise that in our recovery plan that we have developed collectively, we've made clear our commitment to sustainable and inclusive recovery. And we need recovery that works for everyone in our part of the region. Today, the Poverty Truth Commission, I hope, will form an important part of that work, so that we can learn more about poverty, particularly post-pandemic. Potentially, we will be the first combined authority to look at the outcomes of a Poverty Truth Commission. And I think we're probably also the first post-COVID, well, not that we're post-COVID yet, but you know what I mean, we will be the first one that is going to be set up to look at poverty as a result of the pandemic. The Truth Commissions themselves are nationally recognised models of good practice. They help people who have lived experience of poverty to join in conversations with those of us who make decisions that affect their lives. So I think they're a really, really powerful opportunity to hear the voice of the people in our region that we often don't hear from. Normally they would bring together people from civil society, from business, from the public sector, and those people who live in difficult circumstances to come up with practical solutions and real actions that can make a difference. They only work when they're built on genuine partnerships, equitable partnerships, where everyone has their voice heard respectfully in those sessions, and that will mean that we will need an independent host to support us through that work. It's quite challenging to talk about how we recruit people to be involved in this at the moment, given that we can't meet, and actually this is the sort of thing that I think Christine highlighted, the difficulties of not meeting people in person. I think doing things digitally might create us difficulties, but I think we need to make progress on this as quickly as we possibly can. And hopefully with the vaccine in the spring, we'll be able to make some progress on that. We know that we're working as a combined authority working towards post-pandemic to make sure that poverty, inequality, economic and social cohesion are all at the forefront of what we're trying to do together. And this would help us to co-design solutions that we could then put into practice. I was preparing we do a lot of social media to promote our work in this, And one of the questions Beth asked me to respond to was, what do we think the outcome of this will be? And actually, I can't predict that, because we need to listen, don't we, to what we hear from the people who are involved in this before we make decisions about what difference this will make. So I think it's really, really important that we start with that level of understanding that it isn't what we collectively think we ought to be doing. It's about listening to them and then shaping that collective view into something which we can then take forward to deliver. And I know that Robin will be involved in that work. Our Inclusive Economy Board will be involved in that work. Bishop Christine has been really supportive of all of that. We've also done quite a bit of research across other areas that have explored these. I mean, they've been running poverty truth commissions in Salford in Scotland, and we've got a local one in Gateshead, which sadly was just set up before the pandemic hit. But we clearly can learn from things that have been taking place elsewhere. It isn't a quick fix, I think, Chair. We're anticipating this might take a couple of years, and because it needs proper investment and real listening, and actually just to build up the confidence in those who are part of this process. That will all take time, and we need to recognise that as we work through this pandemic, that won't be all that easy. But I think this offers us a way to create a future, bringing together the people who we are most keen to support in that inclusive economic proposal that we are all totally committed to, so that we can redesign, recreate a new future for our region. And I'm delighted we brought this report today, and that we will start that work in the new year, and hopefully we can provide updates regularly to Cabinet, so that colleagues all, even though you won't necessarily be involved in it, we can all hear about the work that's going on through that process. I'm really pleased to be able to propose this today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Joyce. Yeah, just to echo that, this is not a poverty commission, it's a poverty truth commission. And it's that truth that's important. Unless you understand people's circumstances, unless you see it from their perspectives, their personal barriers, and their personal objectives, there's no point in telling people what they should be doing. You've got to understand it, their objectives. And it's about making sure it's done with people and not to people. Does anybody have any questions for Joyce on this, or any comments they would like to make? Robin.
Yeah, again, great initiative, and as Joyce quite rightly reflected, there'll be, I think, the engagement of the voluntary community and social enterprise sector is crucial. I think having an independent person, organisation running it is great, and then that engagement of those organisations that are already doing some great work to kind of amplify some of the voices that don't always get a chance to kind of touch policy. So absolutely great, really keen to see how some of the existing kind of advocacy work can be built into the process.
Thanks, Robin. Very useful to have your perspective as one of the leading lights in the VCSE sector. And with that, it looks like we'll move then. There's a couple of recommendations there. First of all is to note the progress in relation to the development of the Poverty Truth Commission, which is just to note it, so I'm assuming that's agreed. The second one is more substantive, to authorise the Director of Policy and Performance in consultation with the portfolio holder, so that'll be Joyce, to finalise the next steps to take this forward, including securing the appropriate funding. Is that agreed? That's agreed. Thank you. I understand that obviously, Christine, you have to attend to other duties at this point. Thank you very much for attending. Bye-bye. And so before we move on to the next item, it's occurred to me that we didn't formally go through the recommendations from the Brexit item on the report. So there were 5 items there. 4 of them were to note. So the first one was to, I'll take them as a bunch, to approve continued close working with business, to continue to highlight relevant issues with government, including securing longer-term replacement for EU funding. Item 4, to continue to use NTCA's website to signpost support to business. And 5, to agree further Brexit updates. So unless anyone's got any objection, we'll take all those 4 as an items. Everybody agreed on them. The more specific, because it is policy related, is item 3, which is to approve further development of a Northeast Freeport proposal. So everybody agreed on that one. Right, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on now to item 10, the investment fund update and funding approvals. Always a major item on the report. This is the substance of what we do as a Multi-Client Combined Authority. So on this, I'll hand over to the portfolio holder. And I think there's a lot of background noise. If you could just check where that's coming from. Otherwise, the public won't be able to hear the reports. Well, it seems to have died down. Thank you. Over to you, Councillor Pickard, please.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I'll speak to the North of Tyne Investment Fund report and recommend it to Cabinet today. Since we last met as a Cabinet, we are now in lockdown, something we all wanted to avoid. It is necessary, nevertheless, if we are to save lives and to support our NHS. Once again, our local authorities are at the front end of keeping people safe, and it's our job as a combined authority to support our North of Tyne economy. To look for innovations that will make a difference now, to support business recovery, and to leave a legacy that lasts. Our recovery innovation deal will do just that. The Mayor and Cabinet have been clear that we need to support recovery, helping our economy to adapt and survive, and help us create an economic exit route from the crisis in which we currently find ourselves in. Providing 10 million of funding for the investment fund, we can make a difference to businesses staying viable, to keeping good jobs, and to support our region to build and renew. The deal will also help the combined authority meet its wider inclusive economy objectives, including by encouraging the development of productive and sustainable local supply chains, including with social economy organisations. After 9 months of restrictions and economic devastation, we no longer just talk about recovery, but of survival of our businesses and those who rely on them for their livelihoods and jobs, for their homes and their families. So we need to support innovation, creativity, future-proofing and survival, particularly for those businesses who are not part of national chains, but are local and small and independent and need our investment urgently. For some, unless they have a digital future, they may have no future at all. So we will encourage transformation and diversification to shift to online platforms and to digitally commute. Most of all, we will invest in good jobs for people in the North of Tyne. Last week was the anniversary of the living wage, and the same week the Trussell Trust announced a 47% increase in need in the last year. Nearly 50% increase in those needing food to feed their families, and insecure work is also increasing. More employees are working less than 10 hours, or even more working more than 35 hours. This has given a middling out effect in the workforce. In the North of Tyne, nearly 4,000 more people are economically inactive compared to this time last year. And we know that 0-hour contracts have hit historic highs of 1 million nationally. During this pandemic, we in the North have had the highest shutdown sectors, and low earners are 7 times more likely to be in a shutdown sector than in the highest paid workers. And women are about 1/3 more likely than men to work in these sectors. In the North of Tyne labour market, 62,000 jobs, that's nearly 17% of the workforce, are key workers, inevitably leading to higher rates of in-work poverty. Because half of those roles, over 30,000, are paid less than the real living wage, and 1 in 10 are on 0-hour contracts. And so I commend my colleagues for launching our Good Work Pledge last week, attended by nearly 100 people. And I shall continue to urge us all to keep up a pace on our investments. We have committed 40 million to 48 projects, and these projects will attract 104 million of private sector investment and deliver 2,732 jobs. We have now preferred delivery organisation for our Culture and Creative Recovery Fund, providing grants, repayable grants and loan finance to the sector, ready to start for next year. A call for project proposals for offshore was issued in September and closed just 2 weeks ago. This will support the development of a pipeline of investments in ports and quays to meet the needs of the offshore wind and subsea supply chain. And on the Brownfield Housing Fund, we are identifying quick win projects ready to meet the target of 5 million spent by March next year. We have also secured match funding from the European Social Fund for our Employability and Skills programme. We are creating a £9 million new Green Deal fund to support the green growth economy by prioritising projects which can deliver significant carbon reductions, as well as supporting new industry and jobs. We're also launching our £5 million The Digital Ecosystem for projects with particular focus on supporting the growth of startups and early stage digital and tech businesses and the development and growth of digital clusters. We know the pressure on our people's jobs and livelihoods has intensified, and that pressure requires us to go further and faster. I thank the team in the Combined Authority for their work and their speed in bringing forward projects and programmes that ensure our economic future for our residents and our communities. This is our task, to put right programmes in place for good jobs and decent work, to secure the future for livelihoods and our families. I would like to recommend this report to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruce. That was an excellent summary of the situation we face and what we're doing, I've got to say. And, you know, we've had the COVID report, we've had the Brexit report, we've had the points you've made there about the scale of unemployment and economic inactivity. And when you see what we've done with what in the grand scheme of things is a very small amount of resources, the fact that we've safeguarded 1,782 jobs already. We've only been going 18 months. Our 30-year target to create 10,000 jobs is 333 a year. We're on target for 2,732 in 18 months. This has surely got to highlight this call for levelling up and more devolution of resources and funding, because we're demonstrating that we can make a difference. We can spend this money wisely and achieve a real effect. Does anybody else have any comments or question on Bruce's report? Joyce, please do.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say well done to everyone who's involved in the work behind the scenes to make us to make all of that happen. Actually, when you look at the performance data that Bruce and Richard and I see regularly, it's a really good story, and we need to keep pushing out that story about what we're doing, because I absolutely agree with you that we aren't spending huge sums of money. We're spending more than the local authorities have got, but we aren't spending vast sums of money, but we're doing our very best to protect it in this region. And we've kept all of that work going all through the summer, when lots of others had to stop what they were doing. So it's brilliant. And I know that we're reviewing some of the investments that Bruce has set out, on the back of the information that we've had earlier from Rob, really, about the changes in business across the region. I think it's an excellent report. I'm very happy to agree to it today.
Thank you, Joyce. Does anybody else like to add anything? Can't see any hands going up. There's a substantive item in there about a £10 million allocation for our COVID recovery fund. Bruce touched on this, but specifically that value to supporting local businesses. Jobs, and good jobs, particularly through the Good Work Pledge, make a massive difference. They are the foundation to any economy, not just a modern economy or an industrialized economy. But when those jobs are in local businesses, you get the double benefit that local businesses spend in the local community. They invariably have stronger local supply chains. They spend their money back in the local economy. And that's really got to be the future for us, is to have a very deep ecosystem of really strong local businesses, including in the social economy sector. So we'll move to the recommendations. The first item is to note progress to date, as indicated at point 1. Can we agree that?
Agreed.
Thank you. The second is to note the progress in relation specifically to our Culture and Creative Recovery Fund, including the outcome of the recent call. And that'd be very interesting to see. I've had a sneaky peek at some of it, but I've not seen it all yet. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. And note progress of our offshore infrastructure investments and the launch of our offshore innovation program.
Yeah.
Thank you. And to note the progress to operationalise, a wonderful word, the North of Tyne Brownfield Housing Fund. Thank you. And there is actually an awful lot of work going now. There'll be spades in the ground very soon on that. Much more substantive item. Item 5 is to agree that £10 million allocation from the investment fund for the recovery innovation deal, Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. It's always worth specifying it when you're about to spend 10 million quid. Item 6 is to delegate the authority for that to the interim head of paid service in consultation with the mayor and the investment panel to agree the delivery of arrangements and to make the subsequent investment decisions. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. That is going to make a difference to people's lives. It really is. Let's move on to item 11. This is the annual statement of accounts from 2019 to 2020. There are a number of items very similar here. There, I believe, may be a verbal amendment at some point, but can I go straight?
It's probably inappropriate to comment that the same thing happened to the Prime Minister yesterday.
Thank you very much. You know, we talk about technical problems, and the buzzwords of 2020 are going to be "you're on mute." Technical problems also include trying to switch between documents and accidentally clicking to leave a meeting. So my apologies for that. Having got you all teed up once, Cameron, I must apologise, but we'll now hand over to Cameron Waddell of Mazars and the auditors. Thanks, Cameron.
Thanks, Mayor. I will take the report as read. We did issue it a little while ago, so we can give you an update to what's actually reported, particularly in relation to the status of the audit work. I'm assuming everyone can hear me okay as well. Great. So in terms of the work, we are broadly complete. We do anticipate the last bits of topping and tailing to be done on Thursday, Friday this week. We do anticipate issuing an unqualified opinion in the financial statements. We have completed the work around about value for money, and you'll see, Mayor, that we are proposing an unqualified VFM conclusion. It's worth just making the Cabinet aware that this is the last year of that binary qualified, unqualified conclusion. There was a new code of practice laid before Parliament earlier this year, and that removes that. It requires a different form of work and reporting, which we will brief the Audit Committee on when that guidance is finalised by the NEO. We have to also complete some work on whole of government accounts. There's been a number of delays around about that on the part of the National Audit Office, but they did issue the guidance on the 5th of November. There weren't any fireworks, but the deadline for that work is the 4th of December. And for North of Tyne Combined Authority, we do anticipate meeting that deadline as well. The last thing really just to quickly say is that you'll be aware that members of the public electors do have the right to ask questions or object. We've had no such questions or objections during the year. And I guess the other thing is, I'm sure you've all read the report, we do highlight scope for a number of improvements around about the process for producing the accounts and the underlying quality assurance arrangements. And you can see the number of adjustments. So I'm not going to labour that point. I think it's quite clear from the report. We've discussed that at length with Janice around about the next steps for the future years. So I'll leave it at that. It's good news all around, scope for improvement. Need to reflect on the fact the pandemic's also had an impact in terms of officers' ability to be in offices, get stuff, turn around inquiries, and also the same thing from the audit side as well. But I'm more than happy to take any questions now.
Thank you very much. So in the absence of any hands up I can see, Janice, is there anything you'd like to say at this point?
Thank you, Chair. Just, I guess in terms of the recommendations that the auditors have made, absolutely take on board the improvement we need to make around quality assurance, and have already began working around a plan with my colleagues in the North of Tyne constituent authorities in order to get some improvements on that. And kind of what I would say probably is what we've seen is some of the impact of becoming an accountable body for the LEP earlier this year, and the whole, I guess, challenge around managing capacity through a pandemic. Notwithstanding that, we will look to make improvements around the process.
Thank you. Yes, so it's excellent to have an unqualified value for money assessment, and having taken on being accountable body for the LEP in the middle of a pandemic in a brand new organisation, while handing over the accounts for the Joint Transport Committee, well done to the team. You're a very small team, and we don't spend a lot of money on you, so terrifically well done, everybody. So there's a number of others then. If we move on to item 11A, which is the
Jamie, forgive me for interrupting. Before you do, just on behalf of the LEP, I wanted to thank Janice and her team for taking on that responsibility. And any of you who looked at the excellent presentation put forward by Paul Woods, who worked so closely with Janice this morning at the LEP AGM, will see the value of the work. So we're very grateful for your support, Janice, and your team. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. That's really kind. So let's move on to the audit completion report then, shall we?
Chair, that was what...
Sorry, yes, it is.
Yeah, annual governance statement next.
It is indeed. Thank you very much. This is what happens when you switch between different documents. So Janice, thanks. Let's move on.
Yeah. So the annual governance statement, as Cabinet will be aware, sets out our duty to report in terms of that we've done a review of the effectiveness of the governance framework, and we prepare a statement in accordance with that, and that it's been to Audit Committee for their consideration and for their approval. So the statement is attached. There were no issues raised by the committee in terms of the statement, and if Cabinet are happy to approve, we include the statement as part of the publication of the Statement of Accounts.
Thanks, Janice. Anybody got any questions on this? I mean, I've looked through all of this previously, and it all looks in order. No, we're quite happy to accept that recommendation to approve the annual governance statement. Is that agreed? That's agreed. Thank you very much, everybody. Which moves us on to the next one, which is the audited statement of accounts for the year end, 31st of March 2020. So that's Janice again, please.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So a small document for Cabinet to take a look through in terms of the set of accounts. It is a complex document because of the fact that we have to produce group accounts with Nexus and NEMOL, and an element of the transport accounts from NECA. So we are at the end of a chain of a very long process of producing the accounts, and it's a complex read. Quite how we simplify it is quite a challenge, but we continue to face that challenge. As Cameron says, we're substantially complete the audit, but because we're at the end of the chain, there are probably a couple of things that Cameron and I need to finish signing off in terms of the accounts. But broadly, all the adjustments, material adjustments have been made, and the statements are as you've received in the pack. What I would say, though, in terms of the recommendation, whilst initially we asked that you approve the audited statement accounts, because we've probably got a couple of more things to finalise, I would ask for a delegation to myself in consultation with the Mayor to approve the statement of accounts once we've completed the final work with Cameron and the team, in order that we can publish them on Monday as required. And Cabinet have actually already approved the governance statement under the previous report. I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Janice. And indeed, this is a consequence of us being a new organisation, the complexities of devolution. English devolution, I think everybody is aware, is in its infancy, and we end up having to work with partner bodies in very complicated arrangements, which is why we're still waiting for accounts for other bodies in order that we can sign off ours, which is the substance of that delegation. Does anybody have any questions for Janice on this item? That's a no. So yes, well, I'm certainly minded to approve that delegation. Is everybody else happy to approve that delegation? Yep, so that's agreed, Janice.
Great, thank you.
Will it take the other recommendations, which is to approve the audited statement of accounts in line with item 1 there? Is that agreed? Thank you. And item 2, we have indeed approved the annual government statement, so that'll be for signature. Which moves us on to, and if you remember the public watching this, well done for staying this far. This is more about accounts, but this is what democracy is. Item 12, which is the second quarter budget monitoring report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We move into this current year now. So this is the monitoring statement as at the end of September, where we take the information we have at the end of September and forecast that to the year end. The report sets out all the detail in terms of the position. What I would say is that overall, the corporate budget remains in balance in terms of additional grants received. That then reduces the call on the investment fund per se. That's reflected in the report. The overall investment fund, we are reflecting the forecast there in terms of the appraisals and the approvals that have been completed to date, and in line with the report earlier in the agenda. So looking to spend over £15 million this financial year, so quite a significant sum. The adult education budget is in line with the programme plan. So whilst we're working with the providers to clearly understand the impact of COVID in terms of delivery, we don't think there's going to be a material impact at this stage on the funding profile. And then additionally, we've reported the Brownfield Housing Fund will form part of the monitoring report, as you see presented now, and we'll continue to report that as delivery begins in the coming weeks. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Janice. I mean, I've looked at this before, but just looking at it again there, this is really quite remarkable. If you think of the year we've had with the upsets to COVID, the way many of our programs have been delayed, the way we've brought other programs forward, the Brownfield Housing Fund in there, for this to be on target as tight as it is, while everybody's working from home with their laptops on their knees, I've got to say, well done. I think this is excellent work. Anybody have any questions? No? Okay, well, there's the recommendations in there, of course. First of all, to note the forecast. I'm sure we can note that. Is that agreed? Thank you. And to agree the distribution of the business rates retention pilot as set out. That's in paragraph 1.3. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Note the Treasury Management update position. That's in paragraph 1.8. That agreed? And thank you. And the capital monitoring position, that's set out in paragraph 1.9. I think we agreed on that. Yes. Yes. Thank you very much. Which takes us on to not accounts, but budget proposals.
Yeah.
So this is item 13. And again, Janice, if you could lead us through this, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. So this is a report for Cabinet to consider the initial draft proposals for 21-22 and an update to the medium-term financial plan. So if you recall, earlier in the summer, I presented a report that gave the timetable and the approach to developing the budget. And this is kind of the first presentation of where we've got to in developing the budget. Key areas of work that we've undertaken, absolutely reviewing the corporate budget, updating that in line with the establishment that we have in place now, and the various funding streams that we have on board, and the capacity that we have to deliver that. In terms of the investment fund budget, clearly setting out there what we see the programme looking like, certainly at least over the next 4 to 5 years. And what we've indicated there is the position at the Gateway Review, which shows potentially that we'll have expended close to 78 million as we arrive at the first year Gateway Review, which is not unsubstantial considering the first year that we were in operation, that was only a 3-month period. So I think that that's a positive message as well that we can deliver. Again, the adult education budget, no real change to that. That's the profiled programme in accordance with the devolved budget. So no change in terms of our expectation of spend. And then in addition, we continue to set out the brownfield housing land budget and how that's expected to deliver over the next 4 years up to 24-25. We've then added into section 1.6 the accountable body budget, because as we've said earlier, the combined authority is the accountable body for the LEP. So we've just set out there very simply the budget that's expected to deliver that accountable body role. And I consult expressly with the 7 constituent authorities to the LEP accountable body status on the funding requirements for that. And we don't anticipate any change in the contribution for 21-22 and continue the dialogue, perhaps where we may end up with a more sustainable option in terms of funding the LEP. I guess what I would say is at this point in time, clearly we've got the budget announcement, the national budget announcement tomorrow, which may or may not give an indication of changes to funding streams, additional funding streams, etc. But in accordance with the timetable, we will come back to Cabinet in January with an updated programme if there are any changes in terms of additional funding streams into the authority. And what I would say, which I meant to say up front, was the budget proposals at this stage don't include any assumption around a precept, and we're not expecting to build a builder one into the plan for 21-22.
Thank you, Janice. And those caveats are well made. There will invariably be some kind of budget or financial statement again in the early spring. And the chances of the world looking as it does by the end of that budget forecasting period are 0, which is why I'm going to praise you yet again for all the work that you and all the officer team do in being so very flexible in an unstable situation. Thank you. Any questions on or comments on the budget proposals? No, thank you. Okay, so a series of recommendations there. Thank you for your patience while we go through them. First of all is number 1, to agree the draft corporate budget as set out in paragraph 1.1. Are we agreed on that? Thank you. Recommendation number 2 is to agree the draft investment fund budget that's set out in paragraph 1.2. Is that agreed? That's agreed. Thank you. Item 3, the draft adult education budget as set out in paragraph 1.3. Thank you. And for anyone watching, these are all in the public domain. You can have a look in the packs online. Item number 4, to agree the brownfield land programme budget as in paragraph 1.4. Agreed. Thank you. Item 5 is to note the time and wheel levies as issued on the 15th of February 2021. Is they agreed? Yeah. Thank you. And to agree to hold reserves as set out, and note that the Chief Financial Officer will continue to keep the level of reserves under review. Is that agreed? Thank you. So finally, it's just to note that the North East LEP accountable body budget, which is in paragraph 1.6, that's agreed as well. Thank you. We're nearly there. So item number 14 is on appointments. So I'll pass over to John Softley, our monitoring officer.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very straightforward item setting out some proposed member appointments. They're set out in the report. Wouldn't propose to say anything further, Chair, unless there's any questions.
Thank you. No, and just for the benefits of the public, this is that obviously we have new cabinet members from Northumberland, and it's just updating the various transport body approvals. So those items to be agreed on this. The recommendation is that we accept all of those proposals as indicated in the report. Is that agreed? Thank you. And the only thing I would add is that on our meeting, cabinet meeting on the 17th of December 2019, we designated Paul Hanson as our head of paid service until January 2021. Given the unique circumstances of the pandemic and the need to maintain continuity, just to ask Cabinet to agree that Paul's period is extended until our AGM for 2021, and proposals will be brought forward in due course in that period. Is that agreed? Thank you. Okay, so well, this takes us to the date and time of our next meeting, which was going to be on January next year. And at some point we will be back to meeting again in public, but I really don't think it's going to be January next year. So in the meantime, I will no doubt have many meetings with most of you. If I don't, have a very welcome and safe Christmas and a very good New Year. Thank you, everybody.